I tried to get into real estate investing for a very long time, tried a bunch of different strategies as we talked about, finally found the 203K. But I remember still to this day, finishing the renovation, getting the inspection cleared out, like getting the certificate of occupancy and standing in the middle of the house, smelling the new paint on the walls, smelling everything on the floor, and just being like, why do more people not know about this?
Welcome to the podcast, Real Estate Investing with Coach Carson. I'm your host, Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach. This is a show to help you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. If you're a brand new listener or a longtime listener, welcome to the show. Today, we are going to be talking about how to finance your fixer-upper properties. So whether you buy rental properties, which a lot of you are trying to do either on the side or full-time, or you're trying to fix up and flip houses, fixer-uppers are a big part of the real estate investing business. And I'm here today with Matt Porcaro, who is an expert in this subject, not only in flipping his own properties. He's bought multifamily properties he's moved into. He's done house hacking. He's flipped houses to sell. But he's also an expert in the financing of fixer-uppers. And we're going to dive deep in that. So Matt, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, Mr. Coach Carson. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I want to get into your story first. We're going to dig into the types of financing and all the details, but the story always tells us a little bit more about the background. So
Sure.
How did you first get into fixer-upper properties? What was your kind of entryway to all this?
Great question. So I grew up in the construction business. So my dad's a general contractor, had his own business. Tough business also here in New York and Long Island, New York. And growing up, saw a lot of ups and downs with the market. Pretty much his business was pretty dependent on what the market was doing, right? So anyway, long and short of it is growing up, finances were very known to me. Like basically if I knew if my parents weren't making money, right? It was kind of like it was the basis of all stress in our house. And so growing up, they told me, you want to go to school, go to college, get a good degree and get a paycheck every week, because for them having their own business, they didn't have that. It was very volatile a lot of the time. So for them, the grass is always greener type of thing. For them, it was getting a paycheck every week. So fast forward, did the thing, went to school, went for electrical engineering, went into the construction industry in New York City, worked that, and very quickly wanted to learn more about real estate because, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, as we all do. I call it the red pill. For a guy like me, kid like me, who grew up in an environment where, very blue collar, it was an eye-opening book, and it immediately sent me down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, well, how the heck do I get into real estate investing? So, tried a bunch of different methods, explored a bunch of different options, wholesaling, seller financing, did all the things because, I didn't have much money, obviously, as a young kid in my 20s. And here in New York, especially, the cost of living and everything was immense, right? Buying houses was crazy high. So fast forward a little bit, I just stuck with it as best I could. And eventually through talking to people, going to local real estate investment association groups and stuff, I found out about the 203K loan, which is, what we could talk about in the renovation financing side, but it's an FHA loan, but it's a version that allows you to purchase a fixer-upper property. So essentially what I did was I bought a house that I knew I was going to fix, basically do a live-in flip, renovate it, and also house hack it at the same time because it was a duplex property. So basically it was like a fix and flip with training wheels on for me. And I was able to only put 3.5% down, which is what the FHA requires, which in New York, even for me, was doable, right? It was just about $9,500 down out of pocket. That was it. Fast forward, did the renovation, built a ton of equity into the deal, and built $130,000 plus in equity on it, and then was able to live for free on the house hack. So that big equity boost really gave me the big jump into the game, because previously I couldn't really do flipping without any money, right? But that equity, I was able to tap that equity, use that equity, and then combine it with other renovation financing loans like hard money, stuff like that. And then, that's where it all started.
Yeah, I love your story and I want to go back to something I think a lot of people will relate to is you mentioned when you first got into the business, you sort of spin your tires a little bit. And a lot of people do. You're looking for properties. And so I was wondering if you could speak to two things. One, when you're first starting and you're looking for deals, you're looking for like the strategy, like how you actually land on one that kind of fits your, your skills, your interest. And then the other part is you mentioned the financing, how not having the cash, like it's like a chicken and egg problem. Like you have to you have to have money to get in the game. And yet, if you don't have any money, how are you supposed to get in the game? So like so maybe speak to that kind of mindset you had to go through there, of just that beginner's mindset. I can't get in the game yet. How do I find deals? Just what that was like.
Man, that's the $1 million question, right? Honestly, I would say give or take, it took me around. I first got interested in real estate, very quickly after going into the workforce, into my engineering job, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I probably read about a year after I was in the workforce. It was actually a cool little story. I was walking for my lunch break, and I was in New York City, down near the World Trade Center. We were doing a project down there. I walk out and there's a guy selling books on the side of the road. Such a funny, cliche story. And sure enough, there's Rich Dad, Poor Dad and the Cash Flow Quadrant and all his books lined up. And, I had heard about it through the grapevine that it was a good book, but, and I just kind of was like, let me pick this thing up. And I was like, how much for all three? He's like, give me $5. And I was like, okay, cool. I picked it up. I did not put the book down. And I read that whole series in probably, a little bit at a time. But the point being is you kind of get entered into that world, and then you're like, okay, like you said, now what? How do you find what to do, right? In the beginning for me, I first read that book and was like, I was like, okay, I have to own a business. Real estate still to me wasn't even going to be feasible for me. Again, growing up in New York, seeing how my parents were, struggling and at times, and just knowing that, okay, 20% down payment in New York is like $100,000. I couldn't sniff $100,000. You know what I mean? And so the idea was like, okay, well, I don't think real estate's even for someone like me. I think it's for rich people or older people that have a big savings. Like for a young kid, it's not attainable. But through over time, I was interested in it, listening to podcasts, and I would listen to one podcast and learned about wholesaling. And obviously with wholesaling, you get into that because the kind of, we could talk a lot about this, right? But, wholesaling for a lot of people out there, the infomercial type thing, they say, hey, get in with no money, no credit, nothing, right? But at the end of the day, you get into it and you start to realize that, it's a grind, right? You need to do a lot of work. You have to put in a lot of time. If you don't have money to invest in marketing for these deals and stuff like that, you really got to have a lot of time. And I had a 9-to-5 job. And so that didn't work. Then I started going around and knowing, hey, I have a construction background. Maybe people will be willing to flip a house with me. And, you hear about use other people's money, right? So I kind of did that. And, I went pretty far with it. I was getting in touch with local investors and talking to them and being like, hey, listen, we'll do the renovation, you just, but you got to finance it. And they're like, okay, what's your experience? And I'm like, well, I haven't done it yet. And they're like, sorry, kid, no shot, right? Especially here in New York. New Yorkers aren't as friendly either. So, so it was just like this natural progression. And for most people, it's hard, right? And I think you say it's like kind of the age-old beginner question for a lot of people getting to break into real estate, because I think people don't realize it really is a grind in the beginning. And that's the reason why I love the 203K so much, really, because it was a combination of two things. It requires a little bit of money, but not a ton of money where it's not attainable for anyone, right? 3.5%, even for me, was attainable. It checked off all the boxes for me in terms of being able to get financing, being able to do the renovation and do a flip, right? And then also allowed me to house hack, which I knew I was going to keep the property and live in one unit, rent out the other. So it taught me the BRRRR strategy, essentially, and then also the refinance, the renting, and landlord strategy. So really, it's just, I think it's a longer burn than a lot of us think. And I think that's really the signal I want to give away to people is none of this is easy. And unfortunately, there's marketing out there, there's gurus out there, there's guys out there that just make it seem so much easier than it is. It really isn't that easy. It's worth it, though. It is worth it. And if you put in the work and you find the one that works for you, it works out. But for me, given my financial situation, that's what worked.
Yeah, and I think we all know in our gut there's no free entry to anything in life. You pay your tuition to get in college, you pay to get a job, you have to experience. So I think we all know that intuitively. So even when we hear the infomercials or the social media hype, it's okay, what's a catch? But I love the idea of saying it's going to be hard, but here are like some beginner strategies that can work. And so the 203K is a great example. And let's dive into that a little bit, because one of the challenges we said is financing, is down payment. So 20% down payment on a $400,000 house. Now you're talking like big money, $100,000. And so lower down payment, that's the benefit of an FHA loan. Could you talk about maybe just kind of a punch list of pluses and minuses of going this route, of going with a fixer-upper first of all, then going through the 203K loan, and we can kind of unpack that a little bit.
I think number one, a lot of people don't even know that you could buy a house with less than 20% down. I'm always astounded to learn that there's a lot of people out there that still don't even know that you could put less than 20%, right? So the 203K loan, again, is an FHA loan. For anyone that's not familiar, FHA loan is the federal guidelines for loans. The whole point of it was to get more people to be home buyers, right? It allowed people to get into houses for much lower out of pocket, because maybe, I don't know the whole history, but in the past, maybe they always did require 20% down or a higher percentage. So this wanted to give people the ability to get in with very low out of pocket. The 203K version it allows you to wrap the renovation cost into the mortgage. Okay. Now, the caveat with all of this is that it is FHA. It is a homeowner occupied loan, right? So everyone's first question, usually if they already have a house, is like, well, how do I use it? And, there's more details and there's ways to do it, but really ideally this is for someone starting out, doesn't have a house yet, or maybe is looking to move into a new house and looking to get started that way. They're renting right now, or they're first-time home buyers type of thing, but they want to get into the game via house hacking, or really just make a good financial decision right now. And we could talk about what's going on in the economy and just like the affordability and stuff, and what it allows people to do. And the whole point of the 203K loan was to get more people into properties and neighborhoods they were looking for, while also like refurbishing and making the communities nicer, right? We're going to not only give you the purchase price for the renovation or for the purchase price for the home, but we're also going to give you the money to renovate it, and allow you to finance that over 30 years. So it's a great way to get into something like that. It's a low barrier of entry as far as loans are concerned, right? 3.5% is pretty much the lowest you could put down, sans like a VA loan or something like that. So it's a little bit of money, but not too much. Again, very attainable for anyone in any market. For a $500,000 loan, you're looking at about $17,000 or $17,500. Seems like a lot, but if you really get disciplined, you can save that, I think, in a year or so in any market. Pretty decent. You don't need anything crazy with your credit score. 600 credit score. It's technically a 580 minimum, but banks won't talk to you unless you're in the sixes. And they look for 2 years of tax returns. So the other caveat, obviously, to it is a doc loan. It is an owner-occupant loan, and they are looking at your finances. They judge what you get approved on based on your debt to income ratio. But again, when you're just starting out and you're looking for that leverage tool, like I was, it gave me the ability to get into something, learn the ropes, get the benefit of the equity, plus, again, the house hacking concept, right? So FHA, a lot of people know FHA because one of the cool things about it is it allows you to buy up to a 4-unit property, still only with 3.5% down. So, as you know well, like house hacking became really big, especially in the last couple of years. And this is a way, people have found like, hey, listen, this is a way that I can offset my living costs, which is, especially in this day and age, the biggest cost for most people. So if you could offset it by putting other tenants in there, not only does it save you a ton of money, and which I say is net cash flow to you, right? If you no longer have to pay $2,000 a month in rent, that's $24,000 extra in your money in your bank account every year, right? And hopefully you're investing that too. So
yeah, it supercharges your savings. House hacking is such an amazing tool, and 203K combined with house hacking is really like adding fuel to the fire. You're really getting your foot in the door, and I think that's what, when I'm listening to your story, Matt, is like, it's the story of getting your foot in the door and how much that opens up the options. You just got to get in the game, and so 203K is an amazing way to get in the game. And we're going to talk about some of the other loans, like once you're in the game, maybe some of the other tools. But I've noticed recently that a lot of investors are frustrated and even lost with the tough market cycle right now. Interest rates are up, prices are up too, which means cash flow is tough to come by. But I also know that the most profit is made as an investor during times of change and uncertainty. That's right now, and I'm seeing it firsthand. Which is why I've decided to start a private online community and coaching program called Rental Property Mastery to help you adapt and then thrive in a changing economy as a small and mighty investor. and I'll help you make progress with regular feedback and coaching from me and other experienced investors, regular accountability through small action teams that meet weekly, and deep learning on how to buy rentals, finance them, and manage them passively. Your journey as a rental investor can be lonely, but you can get the support you need from me and a community of fellow investors inside Rental Property Mastery. Just visit coachcarson.com/RPM. The first 30 new members can get a permanent $500 discount using the coupon code RPM 2023. I want to speak to one other thing for those who are new and they're like, okay, cool. FHA, 203K, getting loan the money down. I get all that. That's a great option. But I can't see myself, or I'm scared about doing a fixer-upper property in the first place. Like, I'm going to get a property with a bunch of work. Am I going to make a huge mistake? Like, can you speak to that whole side of it, of managing a project, having to hire contractors? Because that's a whole nother thing they have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And understandably so. I grew up in the business. So the house I'm in right now, I don't pick wood paneling. This wasn't a finish I chose. Me and my wife are actually doing another renovation loan on our own forever home. We bought our forever home last year. We're doing a big reno here in New York, permits take forever. But the point being is, even as a contractor and growing up in the business, it's still a slog, right? Dealing with subcontractors and everything like that. So the FHA 203K is built in a way to help you as much as possible. The problem with the 203K, just as a whole, like the zeitgeist of the 203K and the FHA, is a lot of real estate agents don't want to deal with it. Sellers agents, they tend to resist it. And even lenders themselves don't really know about it. And to them, it's just more work. Okay. But as someone that grew up in the construction industry and worked high level construction, multi $500 million plus projects in New York City, I can tell you that the way the 203K is built in terms of the paperwork you need to give, how you vet your contractors, the timelines, the schedules, the way you build your scope of work, this is actually exactly how any reputable, larger scale construction project operates, right? So there's a lot of things in place to make sure that you do the renovation correctly, right? A lot of things that people look at it as like, oh, it's more paperwork, but it's actually all built there and there to protect you. And you have to use it as a tool to protect you in your advantage. So a couple things in the process. The first thing is when you get into contract on the property, someone called a 203K consultant comes into the property and helps you build a scope of work based on what needs to be done to the property. They also do an inspection. 203K consultants are typically also inspectors, home inspectors. So they come in, they do an inspection on the property, and they should also have a background in cost estimating, right? Have a rough idea. They're not supposed to be perfect, but they have a background in cost estimating. So essentially what they do is they build the scope of work for you. And in construction, the biggest killer that kills everybody is an unclear scope of work. Okay. So the beauty of that is if you have a really good consultant, and there's lots of good ones out there, right, that understand the process and also understand how to renovate and build a scope of work, they build up this scope of work. Now you have this scope of work. Now you shop this scope of work out. You basically just copy and paste it. You get rid of the numbers. They'll give you an estimate of what they think the work should be, but it really goes ultimately by the contractors. But the hack is you take that scope of work and you shop it out to multiple contractors. Again, this is exactly how it happens in large scale renovation. We call it leveling the bid. You do a bid proposal and then you have all the contractors come in, but now you have all their numbers in a row and you're comparing apples to apples, right? So it's a great thing in that regard. You can get it. You can get a good contractor that way because you really understand the pricing a little better. The scope of work is very clear. And then when you get to close, you pick the contractor, you end up, that budget goes into escrow when you close. It's very similar to hard money. If anyone's familiar with hard money, you have your purchase price plus your renovation budget you give them. When you close, the seller gets paid, your renovation budget goes into escrow. And then what happens is as the contractor goes through the process, you bring out the 203K consultant and they do draw inspections. Again, very similar to hard money. And what they do is they inspect what's been done with the property and they pay the contractor based on what's done. As someone that grew up in the business, I can tell you it actually is a good thing for contractors because you have a neutral third party. The 203K consultant is essentially a referee. How many times have you heard contractor owner, issues, right? They're butting heads on like, oh, I should pay you for this or I shouldn't pay you for this or whatever. It really makes it like a very even playing ground so that it's like a neutral third party and then it makes it a lot easier on everybody. It's like, hey, listen, this is finished. This is not. This is what it is, right? So it helps you go through that process. And again, these are all things that are built in that certain way. What I will say, and just a red flag, is that is the way this should be done. But there's a lot of people out there that don't do it this way, and that's why they'll end up falling on their face on something like a 203K or other renovation loans.
Very interesting. I have a comment and a question. So a comment just about a 203 consultant. I think it's really cool for a new investor. You're sort of turning an objection on its head and saying, oh man, you have to go through the paperwork and all these steps. But as a new investor, you really need training wheels. Like you need a scope of work from someone else. Like, you need to borrow don't have to reinvent that wheel. So you have this consultant who comes out, who helps you do the estimating, which is a huge challenge for a lot of new investors, helps 100%. You put a scope of work. The next question, though, is it seems like one of the intimidating steps is picking contractors. And I wonder if you have any tips as someone who grew up in the business, finding I've had a lot of bad contractor experiences where people, I remember my very first deal, my very first fixer-upper was not a 203K loan, but I hired a painter out of the Yellow Pages, showing how old I was at that point, 21 years ago. Yellow Pages, just going down the list, let me hire this painter guy. He comes in, I don't know anything about painting, but he throws a bunch of sheetrock on the wall, like so sheetrock mud, and like he doesn't even sand it down. He's just like putting mud everywhere on the walls, and then he starts painting it without sanding. I was like, I'm 23 years old. I don't know what I'm doing, but that doesn't look right. Like I started calling him out. I was like, you're not doing this right, are you? And he got pissed. He started throwing his ladder into the wall. The guy was basically high on something. I don't know what was going on, but anyway, that was my first painter. My carpet contractor did seams in the carpet that looked like the Grand Canyon. So I made tons of mistakes. For anybody out there who's made a mistake, I've been there. But I guess the question is, how do you avoid the really bad scenarios with contractors and find some that nobody's perfect, right? But that will deliver a good quality product. It's something that you can live with.
Yeah. So I could talk about this probably for hours alone because I have so much experience here. But I'll boil it down to maybe 3 things. The first one and most important thing is that, the lender's only going to, number one, there's a very big misconception out there that you need something called a 203K certified contractor. That doesn't exist. You can get they can go on a website and say they took a test on how to do the 203K, but FHA and HUD does not certify contractors. Any contractor that's licensed and insured, experienced, and has good standing business line, but also they ask about business lines of credit. Okay. And so that's going to lead me into the next thing. But any contractor that's reputable, licensed, insured, and everything like that is going to be eligible to do the 203K for you. Okay. That brings me to the next point, which is the contractor you want to use on this is not your Aunt Sally's handyman that sometimes does one big project every couple of years when he gets it and he works out of the back of his truck and, he gives you an estimate on a legal pad, right? He might give you the project for what you think is a really cheap price, but that's why it ends up blowing in your face. So the 203K actually is known for something which a lot of contractors get spooked out by, which is there's caveats to it, but they don't give you an upfront deposit if you're doing a full 203K loan. Okay. Now, again, I'm going back to what happens in large scale construction. Okay. Nobody gets a deposit in any larger scale construction because what happens is the budget is in escrow. The money is guaranteed. I tell contractors all the time, if you do work for, a guy just off the street and you say you agree that the price is going to be $20,000, do you check his bank account and see that he has $20,000 to pay you? No, right? So the idea with this is the money's guaranteed. It's in escrow. They're gonna give you money to complete. They will give you material up front, so they will give you money to mobilize. But the reason for this is that they don't want contractors that are completely cash poor. Like you said, inexperience. What do you say from experience? My dad growing up, I've seen hard times. I've seen when my dad went months without work and he'd finally get a job and that deposit came in. He wasn't spending the money on mobilization. He was spending on catching up on his car payment or his mortgage payment. And I've seen it happen. And listen, my dad's a man, my dad is a man of his word, and he knew he was able to mobilize without it, but that money wasn't going directly to the project. It was going to something else. And the whole idea here is you want to make sure that your contractor has the funds, they have the ability to mobilize, they have trade lines with supply houses, they have the backup, because what happens is if you get through the process and the contractor overbids heavily or underbids heavily and they get to a certain point where they're stopped dead, you can't continue, you ran out of money on your budget, now you have to come out of pocket. So again, it's there to protect you. So the contractors you want to look for are guys and gals that have an outfit. They have a back office to help with the paperwork. They're a business that, does, larger scale renovations often. One of the best ways I say to find contractors is just use your personal network and your extended network. A referral goes a long way. A hack that a mentor taught me back in the day was if someone makes a recommendation to you for anything, just ask them to make a personal intro to you and in an email. Say, Hey, Tony, this is Chad. Chad's a good friend of mine. He's looking to do work on his house. If you please take care of him. I said you did great work by him. Now that contractor, you're not just a guy off the street. They know that they want to do good by you because they want me to continue to give them referrals, right? So, it's a combination of all those things. But, and then from there, it's really get as many bids as possible. I'm doing it right now with my own house. I get at least 3 bids on everything, on every trade. Even with guys that I've used for years, I still want to keep them honest and just know that I'm paying market and getting the best price. But I usually always like to go for the middle number, just because if it's too low, it usually means there's misscope. So you kind of get multiple bids, you pick kind of the low to mid, and it's also got to be someone that you feel like you could trust.
Very helpful. Follow-up question on screening them. You hear everybody recommend that they should check their license and insurance. What does that mean? Like, what are you actually checking? What kind of license? What kind of insurance? The devil's in the details.
They basically have like workman's comp insurance. Usually they'll give you a printout. Usually a legitimate contractor is going to have a insurance company. They call their insurance agent and they give them a spit out that same day. I mean, this is what insurance companies do. Growing up, I remember driving down to the insurance place down the road from my parents' house to pick up a copy and so I could bring it back for them. So the insurances is just so they know you have workman's comp insurance if anything, and liability insurance if anything happens on the property. Fire, damage, anything like that, the contractor's covered as well. With the licenseship, you're able to just go and verify. A lot of it's online now. You could just go and look up the license number, and then see what their standing is. Usually it'll say if they're in good standing and they have any issues. You could always also call up the local, building department to verify it. One thing that does happen a lot, and I wouldn't say it's a red flag, but it's something to look out for, is you have a lot of contractors that work under other people's licenses. While it is kind of legal, I don't know if the 203K is good with it. I've really never heard too much about if someone submits something that's different, like a DBA or something like that, like doing business as. But you go and just verify that the license number that they give you, that business name is the same business on the invoices that they're sending you, right? They're not just sending you a bunk license number and insurance.
I know one of the things I always ran into as a new investor was in South Carolina where I am, there's different levels of licenses as well. You'd have like the work, local contractor license who could do under a certain amount of work, and then you had a general residential license, and then you had a commercial contractor license.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's just a lot of terms and terminology.
Sure.
So I think just studying your own states, just doing some basic homework on the licensing website for the state, and then the insurance. I've had some situations where people to send me an old insurance document, and you got to check the date. You got to check the date.
You always got to check the date. It should be same day or the day before. Insurance always has to be immediately up to date. And these lenders, right? If you're using a renovation loan like the 203K or any of these reno loans, they're going to ask for that a couple times. They'll even ask for it like the day of closing again, just to make sure that the insurance is still active, right? Same thing with the licenseship. Usually these lenders, they have a renovation loan department. That's obviously one of the big things with this is don't do a 203K with a lender that doesn't know them or doesn't do them often. There are lenders out there that specialize in these types of things. Those are the ones you want to work with. But they have a back office that is kind of used to doing this process. So, it's taking a little bit off your back as well.
So much more we could go into on the 203K loan. I'm going to put links in the show notes that
sure.
Check out Matt's Instagram channel, his website. He's got free information. He's got other, consulting, like really, really good stuff, Matt, on just going deep on a really important tool. So we might come back around to that, but I want to go to a question or really a topic I think is really relevant in 2023. And maybe it should have been the initial question, but is the reason I think a lot of people are looking at fixer-uppers is as an investor, it's tough to find good deals. Like
100%.
To find a good deal meaning a rental property that cash flows, or a fix and flip that you can buy below value, or a rental that just makes sense from a long-term investment standpoint. So one of the reasons we all get into properties that are fixer-uppers is because sometimes that's the only way you can get a deal. So I wanted you to, if you don't mind, just talk about that side of things, finding good deals, maybe from the perspective of when you first started looking, you were kind of spinning your wheels. You've gone out and bought other types of properties, but maybe just some strategies you've used and why you look for fixer-uppers instead of other types of properties.
Yeah, so everything boils down to value add investing, right? And this is not only done in real estate, this is done everywhere, right? You have your Warren Buffetts, right? Like they look and they do the deep dive on companies that they feel like are undervalued, and they purchase those undervalued assets and know that over time that those will appreciate and be a good buy in the long run. So that's always been my mantra. I never really understood turnkey as much as I know it's a viable thing and maybe for wealth preservation. But in my humble opinion, when you're starting out, you gotta get your feet wet. You gotta get your hands dirty, and you gotta earn that early equity. You gotta earn that. You got to force that appreciation. You got to force equity into your deals, right? And like you said, it's getting harder and harder to find good deals. So when you pick up things that are distressed, that gives you the better option to put things into your own hands in order to get things to work out better, right? One of the things, going back to the 203K as an example, but one of the things with people with the FHA loans is they're really struggling to find house hacking opportunities to buy multifamily properties, right? Because the standard FHA, if they have chipped paint in the property, they can't buy it. So people that are wanting to use the FHA, they get really frustrated because they look at these properties and not only do they not even close to cash flow, they can't even buy it because because it needs to be like in pristine condition for this to even work. And like you said, if it's in pristine, we're having trouble finding houses that are beat up at a good deal, right? Lo and behold, if it's pristine, it's really not gonna pencil out. So, with the 203K, it allows you to get into these properties for a lower cost basis, right? That lower cost basis means better chance to cash flow and better, and the ability to build equity. There's a very interesting stat I heard recently, and I've been on a couple podcasts somewhat recently, and I've repeated it a lot. And it's that 80% of the existing housing inventory in the United States is over 30 years old. And you and I know, and I think anybody really in the news knows that we're not building houses fast enough. There's just a large demand. Another thing that I was pretty surprised about, don't quote me on this, I read it one place, but I was kind of surprised by it, but the millennial generation is bigger than the boomer generation.
That's
okay?
True.
So
that's true.
It is true. So there's going to be a shortage of housing. And the reality is we're not going to be able to buy move-in ready houses. Renovation is going to become a thing, so we need to learn to do it, right? Look at Europe. If you've ever been to Europe, and I remember when I went to London for the first time, and I had a guy that was a friend of mine that was local to there, and he's like, "Yeah, this building's older than America," and he's right. But it didn't stay. It didn't stay there because they never renovated it, right? They're not that great of contractors, or they built a house that can stay up for 500 years. They had to renovate it over time. So that's going to become a thing. And that's also why I think it's so important right now to that has to be the move. It's going to be the move anyway. Our existing housing inventory is aging, and we're going, they say functional obsolescence happens every 30 years, right? So if it's 30 years, all the houses are 30 years, you're going to have to renovate anyway to have it live another 30.
So if you think about, as a real estate investor, adding value to properties, but also you getting your foot in the door, you've got to have the skill set and the knowledge to add value to the situation yourself. So you've got to learn. You don't have to be an expert necessarily, but you've got to learn and be ready to do this. Fixing up properties, adding value. I love these stats. I'll just add a couple other ideas just for people to think about it. Like we mentioned earlier, there's no free lunch in the real estate business.
Yep.
Like you've got to pay your dues. When I first started, I never was like a great, we did a lot of fixer-uppers, but I would give myself like a B plus maybe at best as a fixer-upper. So I got into the business. I learned how to do it. But the other ways I got my foot in the door and kind of added value was negotiation. So like kind of the wholesale model. So I had a ton of time. I was willing. I wasn't a great communicator, but I was willing to go out and talk to people. So you have to kind of figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. For me, not a great rehabber, but tons and tons of time, willing to make 10 offers a week to people just to try to find deals.
Well, that's the key.
There you go. Like, so it's like fixer-upper skills, time and negotiation skills. The third one I would add, and this goes like the turnkey conversation. If you're somebody who has very little time, maybe you don't even have fixer-upper knowledge, but you have a ton of money already, or you have a good credit plus down payment money, you might not get a home run on the deal, but you could get, interest rates are a lot higher now, but you can get the best interest rate possible because you have a great, making $300,000 per year, you have plenty of down payment. So like in every case, you're paying your dues, whether it's your time and your effort, fixer-upper properties, or you have money and you're just having to use your credit and your money to get. So in all cases, you've got skin in the game. You've had to have knowledge and skills. It's just a matter of whether you have if you don't have the money, you've got to put in the time, or you've got to put in the effort to do a rehab. It's just there's no other way to get started.
100%. Listen, I tell people all the time, right? You don't go on Zillow like. I've had people say things like, "Oh, I've made 3 offers and I can't find a deal, and there's no deals in my market." And usually I qualify that, but like, okay, why do you say that? And they're like, well, all the everything listed on Zillow is priced too high. And I said, well, because if it was priced perfectly to make you a ton of money, it wouldn't be a deal, right? The sellers are not going to, and this never happened, by the way. I mean, I haven't been in the game that long, but maybe 10-ish, over 10 years now. It was never nothing. Things aren't priced to make you rich, okay? Right. And like you said, you had the willingness to place 10 offers a week and understand that this is a grind, right? I had another mentor tell me this one thing, and it was hard for me, even this when I was in the flipping game and I was having trouble finding deals. And, he's like, you got to offer on anything and everything because you never know. You're fishing. You never know the seller's motivation. You have to offer on anything and everything where it makes sense to you. You're not lowballing. This is where it works at your price point. And he said, listen, every 99 offers I place, or 99% of my offers get rejected. But, I have a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio because of the 1% that get accepted. And you have to have that abundance mindset of just knowing that every no and every rejection is going to get you closer to that seller that is willing to sell it to you at a discount. And, don't, like you said, I mean, I don't, finding a fixer-upper is a good thing. That's going to give you the edge. Being a good negotiator is going to give you the edge. And you're just stacking these edges. But most importantly, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to get the offers out there. Okay. You cannot, this game will not go nowhere unless you're making volumes and volumes of offers. Because at the end of the day, like I said, nothing's going to just present itself to you at a number that's going to make you rich. Okay. That it wouldn't be special then. Yeah.
If there's one metric I would like when I'm coaching people is like, if we had to track one metric in your business when you're growing, that would tell us whether you're growing or not and doing successful. It's how many offers are you making on a monthly, weekly basis. That's really the name of the game. That's
my first question for anybody struggling. Said what it is. You talk about money make, what do they call it, like money revenue generating activities, right? Yeah. RGAs.
Yep.
RGAs are not surfing Zillow and just analyzing deals. RGAs are making offers, calling real estate agents, boots on the ground, bird dogging, sending out. Those are revenue generating activities, right? If you're spending money, if you're spending time pontificating and theorizing and all that stuff, you're gonna get nowhere fast. And honestly, I understand that because I was there. Like I said before, it was 4 years, and honestly, a lot of that 4 years was reading more books and watching more videos and surfing more time on Bigger Pockets and just like looking for that perfect thing. But really, at the end of the day, the perfect thing was getting out there and starting to place offers, starting to feel that rejection, starting to understand really what it takes.
Yeah, success is messy. Success is uncomfortable. That's when the sooner you can do it, the better. Love it. Such good advice.
Yeah, man.
So I want to follow up on the couple promises we made earlier that
Sure.
203K loan is an amazing tool. It's one I always think about like financing. It's just a big toolbox. You
Yep.
put as many tools in the toolbox as you can. 203K loan is at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some other fixer-upper options if you're going to buy a fixer-upper property, because when you go getting a traditional loan, a regular FHA loan, just aren't good options when you find these fixer-upper properties. So what are some of your other go-to financing sources that help you?
What I did personally was what happened was when I finished my 203K, I immediately refinanced and into a conventional. So I got my interest rate down, and then about another 6 months later, I pulled out a home equity line of credit, and I was able to tap into a good about like $70,000 or $80,000 of capital now at a 5-6% interest rate. What I did with that was I combined it with hard money to go into my next flip. So, hard money is really, it's funny, it's just another version of a 203K, but hard money loans typically give you the purchase price plus the renovation to do the project, right? So that's what I was doing. And what I was doing also is I was buffing up my renovation numbers in my estimates. So what that actually was doing was helping me mitigate the costs of like the down payment and the out-of-pocket capital. I was basically financing out more money. So essentially, for an example, right, if it was an $80,000 renovation and I knew I could get it done for 80, like 80 conservatively, I'd tell the hard money lender that, and now this depends on making sure you have a good deal and a good loan to value, and that's a whole nother topic. Yeah. But the idea here is like you're able to set yourself up so that you can give yourself an extra $20,000 of playroom to be able to, take that as extra profit or take that to take care of your financing costs or your equity that comes out of pocket. In the actual formal banking side, there's another, actually consumer mortgages. There's another loan out there called the Fannie Mae Home Style. That is the conventional quote unquote version of the renovation loan. That's what I'm actually using for my own house right now. Fannie Mae Home Style loans are actually better for single family. So if you were listening to this episode and you're like, oh, I want to do this, but maybe just for a single family, I don't want a house hack. 203K is usually better for 2, 3, 4 unit properties because it's 3.5% down no matter how many units you get. The home style, they'll go up significantly with the down payment. It's 15% for a duplex, 25% for a 3 and 4 family. But one of the things that people don't know about the home style is you're actually able to use it as a second home loan, okay? And you're able to use it kind of as you can't really say investment property, but an additional property. And that's what you saw a lot of in the last couple of years. It became extremely popular with the whole Airbnb craze, right? So what happened is people were buying, people are able to use this home style loan, which on a second home loan, you only have to put 10% down. So it's still way better than something like hard money. Hard money, they're looking at, depending on your relationship with the hard money lender, 20% down, up to 30% down if you're new, versus with this, it's 10% down. Now, again, it's a little bit more formal, right? You're going through a bank process. It's also based on off of your income too. So it's another thing. But the cool thing about it is you are getting a much lower interest rate. You are able to finance it over 30 years, where hard money is very short-term financing. You're able to use this as a way, again, to do the renovation. And I mean, talk about a home run. A lot of people were buying fixer-upper properties with these home style loans, only putting 10% equity down and then getting, the crazy Airbnb returns we were seeing over the last couple of years at a very pretty low interest rate versus something like a DSCR loan, right? DSCR loans are based off of the asset. Right. So DSCR loans are the opposite of something like a home style or a 203K, where, they go off of what the income production of the property is going to be. But the downside of the DSCR loan is it's a much higher interest rate than what you would pay on a home style. Home style is going to be like a baseline 30-year mortgage. Like right now it's all over the place, but we'll call it 7% versus a DSCR is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 and 10. The other thing is like I said, DSCR, you don't get the renovation. So you don't get to get the benefit. And honestly, you don't get as good of deals.
I want people to hear two things, the conversation you just had. One is the specifics. So I was making a list of all the tools you mentioned. Home equity line of credit, 203K we talked about, yep. Home style, DSCR, hard money loans. So those specific ones are like, people taking notes, like study those because those are the tools and they all have pluses and minuses. But also I want to encourage people to listen to the fluency that you talk about your financing tools.
Yeah.
that you know the down payments, you know the pluses and minuses. And so this is the kind of the aspiration. I always tell people, like, there's no free lunch. If you want to get into real estate investing, you got to understand your tools. Like if you were a contractor who's building a house and you're a carpenter, you would understand all the tools. You'd understand
100%.
how to use your power tools, and financing. This is the power tools of real estate investing. And so there's no perfect tool. They all apply to different situations differently. Hard money, for example, you were mentioning, that they can move quickly. They can cover some of the renovation costs, typically higher interest rates, but
Yep.
they don't care what the condition of the property is. They can move quickly on it. So every single option has pluses and minuses. I've used a lot of private money. That's kind of been my kind of go-to source. And the negative of that is it's hard. You can't just snap your finger and walk into a store and get a private money loan. You got to build relationships. You got to talk to people. And if you're buying in New York, you're probably buying a $500,000-$600,000 property. San Francisco, you're buying $1 million property.
Yep.
And so you got to have somebody who has $1 million, right? $600,000. That could be a challenge. I'm in South Carolina. I had people who had retirement accounts with $200,000 or $300,000. They could loan me money. That works. So again, it's just, there's so many factors here, but I love the conversation of financing, the combination of renovations, to see the details. It's a puzzle. You got to put all these things together. You got to understand your tools, and that's really what leads to success. And the success you've had, I imagine, is a lot of that is just learning these tools and being fluent with them, and knowing how to apply them in the real world.
Yeah, I think, like you said, right, you have to put the reps in, and the fluency of how I talk about this is obviously with me using them and learning them over the years, right? This is something that doesn't come overnight. I think what this has been, it's so cliche, it's been talked about over and over and over and over again, but it really is the truth in that action begets action, right? Like you need to learn this, like you learn by doing, right? I tell everybody in my own community, like, I can help you more if you go out and kind of fall on your face a little bit and go out there and get your feet wet. I can coach you better, right? Like, you're Coach Carson, right? You got the football stuff behind you, right? You don't sit, if you're a linebacker, you don't sit and you're training for your upcoming game. You're not looking at film all week. You're getting out there and you're getting reps in, because the coach wants to see what you're actually doing, because they can give you a lot better criticism that's going to go a long way. So even if you're into this and you want to be mentored, you want to have someone that's going to help you through the process, they're going to be able to coach you better if you do the thing. Right. So, all these financing options are just combinations of things that I've used over time, and I've had to learn just kind of out of necessity. And I think one of the things I probably didn't do early enough was just know that, like, I think really a big strong point and something that I think really slowed me down, especially when I was trying to like get to scale and try to like really up my flipping business, was just be a little more flexible. Like, so you said with like your negotiation, you're really good and maybe had a little bit more of an open mind. I made the wouldn't say the mistake, but I had the learning process of like, everything doesn't have to fit into a square peg, right? Like everything doesn't have to be square peg into a square hole. You got to have some fluidity. And like you said, you get creative. I've used private money myself, but in the beginning didn't really know it was even a thing I can do. And then, when people said something like, well, what do you ask for private money? I'm like, I didn't know. I just kind of threw a number out there and like people were like, okay. And it's like, I don't know. They're like, oh, private money. You could just structure it however you want. So when you realize that like you can actually massage a lot of this stuff, you don't have to just look at something as a pure fix and flip, right? Maybe it could be a creative finance deal, right? There's a lot of different options. There's ways that you can make these things work if you just have more of those tools in your toolbox. But again, that just comes with time in the game.
So in that spirit, I want to come back to your story. These have all been really good tools. Thank you for sharing all the details. In your story, you started off with a fixer-upper, with a 203K loan. You spun your wheels for a few years, and then you got into the game, and you leveraged the first equity into another deal. You got into flipping. I'd love to talk about 2023, what you're up to. Like how have things changed for you? Where is your real estate business? What are you looking at now in the current market?
Pretty much like you said, right? And what I was just attesting to, right? Is you start to learn what you did right or did wrong, or again, there's no right and wrong. They're all just learning experiences. And one of the main learning experiences I took away from flipping was that the money came in and it was nice, and I definitely got addicted to the big paycheck, and being in construction, there's obviously a lot and a lot of fun with flipping, right? A ton of stress, but it is a cool payoff, and especially seeing people, that move in and really appreciate the work you did on the property. But, I wouldn't say regret, but my learning experience was there was a lot of properties that, man, if I held, I would be in a little better position right now. Or the problem with flipping for me was that the money came in and I wasn't reinvesting that. Okay. Flipping is another job, really. It's a way to earn active income, but I am not getting the tax benefits of owning real estate, not getting the passive income benefits and appreciation, which I would have had tremendously, right? So the focus now is really pivoted. I used to be, I'm not a big flipper by any means, but I was, doing 1 to 2 deals a year of like big size here, and like you said, $500,000, $600,000 properties. So big deals, big payoffs. But I'm looking to scale it down and just do a little bit more wealth preservation. So my aim has been more in the Midwestern markets, getting out of Long Island, which is where I'm at, focusing more on that. I've been implementing those strategies that we're talking about, right? Getting back in the trenches, making lots of offers, calling lots of real estate agents, doing the game. Because again, even though, people say it's super competitive here in New York, it's competitive everywhere. There's no easy place, right? And the reality is if it's not competitive and there's nobody there to buy the houses, and it's probably not a good market you want to invest in, right? You want to invest in appreciating markets and good places. So that's been the pivot. But I think to wrap a lot of this up is my strategy is still the same. It's still value add. I'm still not looking for fixer upper duplexes. I'm not looking for turnkey duplexes. I'm looking for fixer upper duplexes and tries, right? Or even single family homes, because I know that that's going to be the way that I can continue to build the nest egg and speed up the process, right? If I just have to save up 20% down payments and get little tiny, $100, $200 a month cash flow, I'll be lucky if I get 10 properties by the time I'm 100 years old, right? So doing the value add strategy, basically the BRRRR strategy, is a combination of both things, and it definitely speeds up the process and, gets you to where you want to go a lot faster.
So one other thing, we've talked about financing a lot. Has the interest rate environment, has the financing the way it is in 2023 changed your approach at all? You mentioned using the BRRRR strategy. I hear a lot of people complaining about it, but there's people like you out there doing it. Like, has anything changed? And if so, how have you adapted to what we're doing right now?
Nothing's changed in the sense that, to your point earlier, it revolves around the deal. Find good deals there's nothing we could do about interest rates. Interest rates are there. They're here to stay. They go up, they go down, they go sideways. We all have to deal with it, right? It's like gravity. We're all fighting it every day, and nobody's above it. It doesn't change my strategy. I think what it does, maybe for the people in my community and stuff, is with maybe lower inventory right now, because not only, do you understand, like, a lot of people are coming out of the market from a buy side with the interest rates, and they feel like they can't afford anything anymore. You have a lot of sellers that are backing out of the market as well, because they have nowhere to go, right? Because their interest rates are going to be high, or they were in a 3% interest rate, and they really just, they want to take extra time and see what happens, because they don't want to go into a 7% interest rate on the next. So I don't think it changes anything. It hasn't, at least for me. Of course, like from a cash flow point, yeah, it could be an issue. But here's the thing. If you get a deal that works now, the interest rate will change. One day you'll refinance. And guess what? If the interest rate just keeps going up, well, you'll be happy you bought now, okay? Because it's the duality of this whole game, right? So focus on buying good deals that work in the current climate. I don't like trying to forecast things, but if I had to bet on it, I would probably think that rates are going to probably trickle back down a little bit in the next couple months. So what I will say is that if and when rates do trickle back down, you will see a good amount of competition come back into the market. So if you are in the position where you're like, oh, you wanted to hold out, wait for rates or something like that, I'm seeing, especially in my community and stuff, and people I talk with, and I'm actively working with people doing this thing. While inventory is low, I'm seeing a lot more sellers concessions. I'm seeing for people getting things much lower than asking price, because the competition's not there. And realistically, at the end of the day, another one of my mentors tells me this all the time, like, there's always going to be motivation. like whatever the market's doing, we talked about those people that are going to hold off. For every one of those people, you have 10 people that can't hold off. Their job moved them. There's a death in the family. They have to sell. They lost their job. There's a ton of different reasons. They have to move cross country for medical, school, whatever. Motivation's still there. So you have to place lots of offers on whatever is out there. Go off market. Off market, I'm huge on, right? Go off market and combine those two mechanisms and just reap the benefits, hopefully in the next year or so when interest rates maybe come down, values are going to go up. And you'll be happy that you did.
Yeah, great attitude. I agree 100%. I'll just add that I think we have to have historical context when we look at where we are in a market. Like every market has, high interest rates right now, but sellers are getting a little bit more soft on the prices. 3 or 4 years ago, interest rates were super low, but man, every seller knew what they had. So there are no perfect markets. And if you look over the last 20, 30 years of the market, even 50, 60 years, we're more in a normal market. Like in a way, like if you look at the historical interest rates, they've not been much different than we are right now.
Yeah. Interest rates are, I say it all the time, like interest rates are not high. 2% was just crazy low.
Yeah, exactly.
I love when people say, oh, they're high interest rate. I mean, when I bought my 203K, it was somewhere at like 6%, and that was in 2016.
Yep.
So, it's like, maybe we're definitely, so here, one little cool, this is a tidbit I got from a guy that's a very, very high level in the mortgage industry and the lending industry. And he gives reports on stuff in a community that I'm in. And one of the key points he made, and a lot of the other mortgage people echoed this, is that the reason you're seeing these rates kind of peak right now is because the lenders are pricing in the fact that they know that rates are going to come down in the next 6 months, and that in that 6 months time, I don't know exactly how the whole mortgage market works, but what I do know is that it hurts them if people refinance out of their mortgages early, right? Less than a year, less than 2 years. They get a penalty for that, okay? So what they're doing is they're pricing in these numbers, this higher, because they're usually only 2 points above the 10-year yield or something like that. Again, don't quote me on this. I'm not a good numbers and mortgage guy, but they're usually 2% over the 10-year yield. And they've been following that historically. They're like 3% or even creeping up into 4% over. And again, so the whole reason you're seeing these peaks is because they're pricing in and assuming that everybody that buys now will be refinancing in the next 6 months. So again, that's a really kind of promising thing where if you can and you do have the ability to buy something now, the whole entire mortgage market is hedging on the fact that you're going to refinance in the next couple months. So when it does come down, you have the ability to refi, and you'll get a much lower number every month.
A lot of great stuff to think about, Matt. Thank you for the tips. Thank you for the feedback, your stories. I want to give you a chance to pass off like what you have going on, and you have a community you mentioned. You're a great Instagram channel. Let people know where they can hang out with you and connect with you after the podcast.
Sure, man. So, I mean, really the long and short of it was I tried to get into real estate investing for a very long time, tried a bunch of different strategies as we talked about, finally found the 203K, never heard anything about it, researched a lot about it. There was nothing about it online, but I did get through it, and I'm very happy I did. But I remember still to this day finishing the renovation, getting the inspection cleared out, like getting the certificate of occupancy, and standing in the middle of the middle of the house, smelling the new paint on the walls, smelling everything on the floor, and just being like, why do more people not know about this? Like, why did it take me so long to find this? So after that day, I really wanted to make it a thing to help people with this. I was able to help friends, help family, and then that turned into what I call the 203K way. And really, that's just my community. It's my platform where I try to give the information that I really wish I had when I went through this process, and I feel like doesn't exist out there. I really think it's the most powerful tool out there for people with real estate, especially if you're looking to get into the game. So you can find me on Instagram, like you said, at the 203K way. I also have a Facebook group, which is really just a place where Q&As, I do live trainings every week for free, and it's just a platform where I want people to be able to ask 203K related or renovation loan related questions and get a clear answer, because if you Google it, there's a lot of wrong stuff on there about 203Ks. So I'm here to clear the air.
Love it. Thank you, Matt. I'll have links to that in the show notes. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show description. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the video description. Leave us a comment in the YouTube comments. Let us know what you think about this. If you have any questions, I'll try to ping Matt and let him know about it. Matt, thank you again for being on here, and I look forward to connecting down the road.
Absolutely, Chad. Thank you, man.
Take care. If you like the show, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my free email newsletter at coachcarson.com/REI Toolkit. In addition to weekly updates, articles, and behind-the-scenes tips from me, my email newsletter subscribers get my real estate investing toolkit, which includes a property closing checklist that I actually use when I buy properties, a real estate deal worksheet, a tenant screening criteria checklist, and other spreadsheets and goodies that will help you on your journey to financial independence using real estate. You can get it all for free at coachcarson.com/REI Toolkit. I also want to take this time to thank some people behind the scenes who make this podcast possible each and every week. This includes my podcast editor extraordinaire, Michael Wynn, my amazing virtual assistant, Megan Thompson, my wife, Carrie, who helps me behind the scenes and is my partner here at Coach Carson. And of course, thank you to all of you, the listeners of this show who make everything possible. This show exists for you. It exists because of you. And I really appreciate you being here for another episode. Everything I've shared with you in this episode has been for general education purposes. I have not considered your specific situation or risks. Before buying your own investments, be sure to consult a financial, real estate, and/or a legal professional. Until next time, I'm Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. See you next time.